All right, let's dive into this. Chip Conley's Learning to Love Midlife. And, maybe, just maybe, midlife is something to look forward to. At least that's what Conley seems to argue. We're going to unpack some of his ideas, things like middle essence, this time affluence thing, and even why it might be okay to have no more fucks left to give, as he puts it.
Well, I think, honestly, one of the most refreshing things is that whole midlife crisis idea. Conley just flips the script on it. He sees it not as decline, but really, truly a time with a lot of potential.
More like a transformation, then.
Exactly. He goes so far as to call it midolescence, comparing it to adolescence. Like teenagers, we go through all these big shifts, physically, emotional.
Okay, but we're not, reliving our teenage angst.
Right.
There's more to it.
Right. It's about, shedding old identities that maybe don't work for us anymore. He calls it a bridge, this phase, between adulthood and becoming an elder. It's about being more authentic, I think.
Makes sense. I'm hooked already. But the book also goes into body image, which I think is a real thing, especially in midlife, all this pressure to look young. So what's Conley's take?
He really takes that on. He questions this whole anti-aging thing. He says, instead of denying our age, maybe we should embrace the natural changes that come with it.
Yeah.
He even talks about Tara Gadomski, this actress who ditched the Botox and embraced her wrinkles, saw them as part of a life well lived.
It's like we're supposed to wage war on our own bodies the older we get.
Yeah. And Conley's saying, we can't win that war. He even uses Emma Thompson in that movie, Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, as an example. She's in her 60s, comfortable in her own skin, and the film celebrates that, It's different from how Hollywood usually shows aging.
I love that. It's like shifting the focus from how we look to something deeper, something with more meaning. And speaking of meaningful, I know the book talks about relationships being important in midlife. What stood out to you about that?
He really pushes this idea of social wellness, having strong relationships, and how it's not just about feeling good, it's about living longer, too. He talks about the Harvard study of adult development. They followed people for 80 years. What they found was close relationships, they were way more important for well-being than money, fame, even genetics.
So it's not about your bank account or your Instagram, but your connections, right?
Yeah, he calls it relational capital. He says it's as important as the financial kind. He gives an example, Myra Lavenue. She found her tribe, as he calls it, through improv classes. She felt a sense of belonging, joy she hadn't had before. It just shows how important it is to, find your people, the ones who get you.
That's powerful. It's never too late for that, right? But what about those doubts that creep in, especially in midlife? Career uncertainties, those bigger questions about life. Does Conley address that?
Oh, he does. He actually suggests these challenges can be good, that they push us to grow. He talks about how in the first part of life, we chase success, achievement, image, status, power.
Climbing that corporate ladder.
Right. And while ambition's fine, he says if we're just focused on those outward things, we can end up on a treadmill, always striving, but never really satisfied.
And I think a lot of people, especially in midlife, feel that, like they're stuck.
He talks about Irene. She had a huge career shakeup in her 40s. Instead of seeing it as a bad thing, she used it to reinvent herself, moved to Copenhagen, found a whole new path, and was happier than ever before.
So maybe it's about getting off that treadmill and trying new things, new paths. But how do you create the time for that, Especially in midlife. People have more responsibilities, aging parents, kids maybe still needing support. Where's the time for all this reinvention?
That's where the time affluence idea comes in. It's not about more hours, but about changing your priorities, being intentional about how you use your time and energy.
Making choices. Then saying no to things that drain you, yes to the things that energize you.
Exactly. He even says to think of your work life as a portfolio. Maybe not one big job, but different things, different streams of income and purpose that combine your passions, skills, what you value, making a life that's more balanced, more fulfilling.
That sounds amazing. It's about having the freedom to create a life that truly reflects who you are, what you want to give to the world, And speaking of giving to the world, I'm curious about finding meaning and purpose, especially in midlife. Does Conley address that?
Oh, yeah. He uses this great example, Doug Glenham. He was a Marine, then a monk, then a money manager, and now he's founded an entheogenic church.
Yeah, that's a varied resume.
Exactly. It shows there's no one right path to meaning. Conley says, think about your ripples of impact, how what you do, big or small, makes a difference. It's about shifting from personal achievement to leaving a positive legacy behind.
That's a really nice way to think about it. It's not about reaching some finish line, but contributing to something bigger. So we've covered a lot here. It feels like we're just getting started with Conley's ideas. So we're back, and we're digging deeper into learning to love midlife, Chip Conley's book.
It's interesting. This theme keeps coming up, this idea of shifting the focus inward as we age to the heart and soul, not just the externals.
He really goes into that. He has a whole chapter about being age fluid, this idea of embracing all the different ages we've been and the ones we'll be.
Age fluid. Okay, I'm listening. But what does that even look like in real life?
It's like realizing that your age is just a number. It's not like a box that defines you. Conley says we get trapped by these ideas of what's okay for different ages, but those are just made up, social rules.
So it's about breaking those rules, being playful, being curious, adventurous, no matter how old you are.
Right. It's about experiencing it all, the youthful energy of your 20s, but also the wisdom that comes with getting older. I like that. It's like you're not stuck on this timeline. You can tap into different parts of yourself at any time. It makes me think about middle essence, which we talked about before. If midlife is like a second adolescence, does that mean like hormones going crazy again?
Conley actually talks about that, yeah. He says midlife often comes with hormonal shifts, especially for women going through menopause. But he says we don't have to see those changes as bad things.
So instead of dreading hot flashes and mood swings, it's like recognizing your body's doing its thing, going through a transition.
Right. It's about learning to handle these changes with kindness to yourself. Conley says, listen to your body, make adjustments. Maybe that's hormone therapy. Maybe it's a healthier lifestyle. Maybe it's just giving yourself permission to rest more.
It's like being kind to yourself, even when your body's doing things you don't expect. And Conley also talks about how our emotional intelligence actually grows in midlife. Have you noticed that?
Oh, totally. There's research that shows the older you get, the better you are at handling your emotions, turning negative things around, finding the good in things. Conley says that comes from, having more life experience, learning from your mistakes. You get better at coping.
Like earning your wisdom stripes.
Exactly. You've been through more, so you sweat the small stuff less. He also says we get more compassionate, more empathetic in midlife, which makes sense. You've seen more struggles, your own and other people's. You just get it more.
That's really beautiful, that deeper understanding that comes with age. And it reminds me, we talked about relationships before. That Harvard study found that those close connections, they're key to a longer, happier life. What else does Conley say about building those relationships?
He says it's more than just having friends and family. It's about finding your tribe, the people who get your values, your passions, even your humor. It's about having that community, feeling like you belong. And that's especially important in midlife, when you might be going through big changes like work stuff, kids leaving home, even losing loved ones.
And I think a lot of people struggle with finding that, especially if they've moved, their friend groups have changed. Any advice on making those connections?
Conley says be proactive. Join clubs, take classes, volunteer, go to events, talk to people who share your interests. And don't forget the relationships you already have. Make time for calls, send notes, be there for people.
It's about making it a priority, not just squeezing it in.
Right. And he also says to be more careful about who you let in. He has this line, in midlife, you have the right to have fewer fucks to give. It's about putting yourself first sometimes, surrounding yourself with people who lift you up, who support you.
I like that. Setting boundaries, making space for the relationships that are really good for you. It makes me think, in midlife, you have all this experience, you've learned things, you become more resilient, you understand yourself better. And Conley talks about wisdom in midlife. What are your thoughts on that?
He has this great analogy. He says, midlife is like being in the middle of a novel. The early chapters, you're still figuring out the plot, the characters, the setting. But by midlife, you've seen enough to start to see the themes, the patterns, the deeper meaning of the story.
So it's like you can connect the dots, make sense of your life's journey.
Exactly. And Conley says you can then create a more meaningful story for your future. He talks about the hero's journey, that classic story structure where the hero faces challenges, learns, and comes back transformed.
Oh, like Odysseus?
Yeah. He says, look at your own life like that. The hard things you've been through, they've shaped you, made you stronger.
It's a powerful way to think about it. Even the tough times, they're chances to grow. So if it's about using that wisdom, creating a better future, how do you actually do that? What does Conley suggest?
He talks about editing your life in midlife, like Marie Kondo, but for everything. Letting go of things that don't work anymore, beliefs, habits, relationships, even stuff you own.
Creating space for new things, for growth, for joy. But letting go is hard, especially when you're used to things a certain way.
He says it's tough, but also freeing. He suggests having rituals to mark those changes, like write down the things you're letting go of, then get rid of the paper, burn it, tear it up, throw it in a river.
I like that. It's about actively shaping your midlife, not just letting it happen. Talk about new beginnings, but for a lot of people, midlife also means more responsibility, like taking care of aging parents, supporting grown kids. How does Conley address that?
He knows those things can be hard, but he also talks about the good parts, giving back to people you love. He says, see it as a chance to deepen those relationships, make memories. And remember, you don't have to do it all yourself. Ask for help when you need it and set boundaries.
Finding that balance, taking care of others, but also yourself, it can be tricky.
Totally. And he reminds us this phase doesn't last forever. Your kids will become more independent. And even though taking care of parents can be tough, it's also precious time with them, making memories.
Good point. It's about being present, appreciating the time you have. So we've talked about a lot, adolescence, age fluid, that hero's journey thing. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about what he says about the spiritual side of midlife.
He actually has a whole chapter on it. He's really open and inclusive about it. Not about any specific religion, but about connecting to something bigger than yourself. Whether it's nature, meditation, art, music, just quiet time.
Finding what works for you, what feeds your soul, gives you purpose.
Yeah. He even talks about finding your monastery of consciousness, that place inside where you can connect with yourself, find peace in all the chaos. Could be a real place, like in nature, or just a mental thing, like meditation.
Love that image. Having that space for quiet, for thinking, even if it's just a few minutes. And we're back, diving into the last part of our exploration of Chip Conley's Learning to Love Midlife. It's really been eye-opening, this whole conversation.
It's amazing how much there is to discover about this stage of life.
One thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of reinvention. Midlife isn't about holding on to the past, but about embracing the power to change.
Yeah, Conley's really good at making the case that midlife is full of potential for growth, wisdom, even joy. It's like a chance to rewrite your story, what success means to you, and build a life that really fits who you are now.
Like a second chance to get it right,
Yeah,
figure out what really matters, and go for it.
exactly. And he reminds us that we don't have to have it all figured out. It's a process of discovery and growth.
Speaking of what matters, I want to go back to social wellness for a second. We talked about the Harvard study, how close relationships are more important for a happy life than money or fame. Can you refresh my memory on some of those findings?
Oh, the Harvard study. Yeah, that's one of the longest studies ever done on adult life. And it's got some really interesting stuff about what makes us happy. Turns out it's not the things you might think, like being rich or famous. It's about the relationships you have, how strong they are. People who are really connected to others, they tend to live longer, they're healthier, and yeah, happier too. They're better at dealing with stress, less likely to get depressed or anxious, and they even recover from sickness faster.
So like investing in your relationships is good for your overall well-being.
Exactly. Conley says it's never too late to build those connections, to find your tribe, the people who really get you and what you care about.
I think that's something a lot of people need to hear, especially as we get older. Our friends change, people move. It's about actively making those connections that make you feel good, that support you. Another thing that really stuck with me was that time affluence idea. Could you break that down a little more?
Sure, it's not about having tons of free time, because who really has that? It's more about choosing how you use your time and energy. Conley suggests trying different ways of working, like consulting, part-time stuff, even starting something you're passionate about that can bring in some money. It's about having a mix of things that give you income, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose.
So it's about taking control of your time instead of feeling like it's controlling you.
Exactly. And Conley says that might mean questioning what you think about work and success. Maybe it's not about climbing that ladder anymore, but finding work that's meaningful and flexible so you can prioritize your well-being, your relationships.
It's about creating a life that feels balanced, right? That fits with what you value.
Absolutely. And he even talks about how our definition of success often changes in midlife, becoming less about external achievements and more about inner fulfillment.
We've talked a lot about personal growth and well-being, but I'm also curious about what Conley says about legacy, leaving something behind. Does he touch on that?
He does. He talks about thinking about the kind of impact you want to have on the world, your ripples of impact, he calls them. And he says it doesn't have to be some big, huge thing. It could be mentoring someone younger, volunteering in your community, just being a good friend or family member.
Making a positive difference, however big or small.
Right. And Conley suggests that this focus on legacy, it can bring a lot of meaning to midlife, a sense of purpose.
Like shifting from what you can get to what you can give.
Exactly. And these contributions don't have to be big commitments. He says it's about finding ways to be kind, generous in your everyday life.
Beautiful way to think about it.
Mm.
Before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to touch on one more thing. Spirituality. Conley seemed to have a very open-minded approach to this. What are your thoughts?
He's all about finding your own way, whether it's traditional religion, meditation, connecting with nature, being creative, or just spending time in quiet reflection.
Yeah.
He's not saying there's one right answer. It's about finding what resonates with you, what gives you that sense of connection to something bigger than yourself.
So it's about that inner connection, that feeling of spirituality, not about following rules or dogma.
Exactly. And he thinks midlife is a great time for this kind of exploration because we tend to be more introspective then, thinking about our lives, questioning things, looking for deeper meaning.
Like finally being ready to listen to that inner voice, that longing for something more.
And he gives some practical advice for nurturing that spiritual connection, like spending time in nature, being thankful for what you have, doing creative things, and just making space for quiet and reflection in your life.
It's about taking care of your soul, along with your mind and body.
Absolutely. It's about holistic well-being, finding that sense of balance and wholeness in midlife and beyond.
Well, this has been an incredible journey into the world of midlife. Thanks to Chip Conley's book, I feel like I have a whole new perspective.
Me too. It's definitely not the midlife crisis we used to hear about. It's so much more than that.
It's more like a midlife awakening, a time of amazing potential for growth, transformation, and joy. And if you're feeling inspired to learn more about how to love midlife, be sure to check out Chip Conley's book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into topics that will make you think and inspire you. Thanks for joining us.